What seems to be going on in education right now is there's been a shift really over like the last 20 years, but very much over the last 10, of a move toward privatizing education. The logic of market mechanisms has taken over education, in my view.
The war on public schools is part of a broader war on the worker. And we can look at this in terms of what's happening to teachers. We are being evaluated harshly, and teachers who don't toe the line or who speak up or against what's going on in public education are being fired.
It really hit hard, starting with No Child Left Behind, this idea that you can run schools like a business, and all you have to do is set standards and measure those standards, and if the kids meet the standard, then you're doing great, and if the kids don't meet the standard, you're doing badly. So you either have to change your teaching, or you change all the teachers, or you change the principal, or you turn the school over to somebody else.
The whole bottom line for a business framing, for a market framing of education, is that there's this easily measurable and quantifiable product. You know, like people are widgets or something. You know, and we're not widgets. We're complex. We're hard to measure. We're always developing and growing as human beings, and so you can't take that, you know, this individual, this person, or even this group of people, and sort of turn them into like a single solitary number, into, you know, something that can be inspected by, you know, number 13 on the assembly line.
I see that as very destructive. I mean, that's going on nationwide. A bunch of that started in Chicago.
Chicago's #1 news.
An outrage tonight from students and parents throughout the city as the final list of schools that will close is released.
This is going to be a community effort, and I'm saying to all parents, we got to lock arms and make sure our children are safe.
This policy is racist, it's classist, and we have to continue to say that our mayor, who's away on a ski trip, drops this information right before spring break.
Even before Arnie Duncan was our CEO of schools. We don't have a superintendent in Chicago, we have a CEO of schools in Chicago. Our CEOs put this in place here, and if students weren't meeting test scores, they were held back a year, or they had to go to summer school, or schools were required to provide after-school tutoring, which after-school tutoring is awesome, but when I saw the after-school tutoring, it scared the heck out of me. It was teachers literally reading from scripts, giving kids tokens in a token economy. It's just a very closed-minded way of looking at education, and a way of looking at education that doesn't take the actual students into account.
And it's sold as, you know, getting students college and career ready, you know, like giving students you know, equal access, like giving them better schools, charter schools, for example.
You hear the criticism that charter schools are really figments of rich people's imagination, and it's all about corporate and privatization and all of that. And to some extent, I understand that argument, because a lot of these schools could not exist without private funding.
You know, a charter school really is a public school that is simply not necessarily operated by the public school system. And you create a licensure process, if you will, that allows smart, committed, and capable people to come together to submit a plan for how they would run a public school.
But what I always find interesting is that when I was a superintendent, I was always out seeking private funding. Any school district in America today that is trying to survive and bring resources to their kids, you're going to seek those resources wherever you can find them.
I think when it gets to the point of what can we do for some at the expense of others, then we've really come to a very sad day.
We have actually what I think what is very clear evidence that when we create competition and create markets around things that are supposed to serve sort of a public and social good, we actually see bad things continually sort of spin out of that.
We're a capitalist country, and capitalism has pluses and minuses, right? Just like any kind of political economic system that you would ever construct.
Students are not widgets in a factory. Test scores are not a valid measure of the productivity of a school. Quarterly profits might be a good measure of productivity of a business, but you can't look at test scores the same way. And that's what I see as the major problem.
So if you listen to Bill Gates, he said a few years ago, the field of education doesn't know very much about good teaching. Well, what he meant was the field of education has failed to quantify student outcomes in a way that can be easily tracked and monitored and measured and managed. And so that's really at the heart of what his project is all about.
The standards, the testing, the teacher evaluation, the selling of software, hardware, the commercialization of every aspect of education on behalf of the Common Core, all these pieces fit together.
And technology has a place, but the whole system cannot be turned on its head to serve a marketplace of technology. And I think that is really what Gates and the technocrats are trying to do.
I would even argue that these reforms are contributing directly to the racism of the schools to prison pipeline. In this way, low-income black and brown students of color are the ultimate guinea pigs for the Gates experiment in public education reform, and I think it is ethically, morally, and politically reprehensible that wealthy elites feel so free to experiment on our kids. And this is especially true given that Gates' own children have not had to face any of his reforms. In fact, I want all of our children in public schools to have what Gates' children have had.
Bill Gates also recently compared classrooms to electrical sockets. And he said electrical sockets are standard, and that way all the appliance makers can plug in to the same electrical socket. And that allows for innovation in the development of appliances. I saw myself as the innovator. And so I'm not interested in any solution to educational problems that requires all of our classrooms to be standardized, that requires our teachers to be standardized and our students to be standardized. Our students and our teachers are the ones that need to be innovators.
And ultimately about 90% or more of the eligible kids at Drummond ended up not taking the ISAT this year. Their parents opted them out in consultation with the kids, and those kids went and read books in the basement, and a handful of kids went ahead and took the test. But parents were pretty calm and pretty united about our position, and the teachers that were boycotting were pretty secure in their position too. But what happened after the testing was much more upsetting than anything that happened during the testing. A few days after the test, some CPS officials arrived at the school and started pulling children out of their classroom to be interviewed/interrogated about what had happened during the ISAT. Why did you opt out? Why did your parents take you out of the test? Did the teacher tell you to do that? What did the teacher tell you about taking the ISAT?
They started pulling students out of my classroom first, and then of the other two boycotting teachers who had sort of been out in the open saying, I'm a boycotting teacher. There continue to be 3 of us very vocal.
They were kind of focused on the teachers. Like, did your teacher say anything about promoting the test or like how you shouldn't take the test?
So students as young as 3rd grade were put into a room. Imagine, 2 ponytails, missing teeth, feet dangling. The investigators are there. Close the door. No advocate. So they're not even the principal is in there.
What do you think about this test? Would you want to take this test if it weren't up to your parents? Is it up to your parents? Did you decide not to take the test? Just like grilling them about their life. And
the investigators asked the child, are you lying? Are you telling the truth?
Just disrespectful. It wasn't even like they were nice and treating us like kids. They were treating us disrespectfully.
It was a witch hunt. It was McCarthyism.
Did you feel like you had to opt out of the test? They're basically trying to get information out of our kids to implicate the teachers in the enormous opt-out numbers at Drummond this year. This was outrageous. Parents were extremely upset. And we felt that really crossed a line. It really broke the trust that we had with CPS, that our kids were in a safe space during the day, and we were outraged.
The Gates Foundation has put $200 million into the development of national standards. And I've been critical of the Common Core standards because I don't like the way they were adopted. I don't like the fact that they were written hastily and in stealth, and it did not include the voices of classroom teachers. I always thought and always said that they should be field tested, and they never were.
This move for a nationalized curriculum is actually harmful because it takes away from the voices of parents and teachers inside their own schools.
I see educators as doing the work of stem cells, particularly at the early grades, but all throughout the career. So these are people who are developing young people into adults.
I couldn't imagine a 22-year-old saying, this looks like a good deal. I think it takes a huge amount of courage and a huge amount of love for this work to continue to say, I want to become a teacher.
There's a lot of money to be made off of education and preparing teachers, and if we move that out of the university's setting, then there's a whole market of how we can go about preparing teachers. And unfortunately, there's been very intense rhetoric to try and undermine what colleges of education are doing, what schools of education are doing.
I mean, I think we're at sort of a turning point here. Teaching either is going to become standardized and deprofessionalized and basically computerized, a la Bill Gates. You know, we're either going to just be, kids are going to sit in front of screens and learn that way, or we're going to really fight back and push for a humane form of education where teachers are professionals and are treated as professionals and can build relationships with students based on their professional judgment to help them learn the best possible.
So we are producing a workforce of people who won't be trained or even know how to speak up, speak out, be different. This is a workforce of drones that we're talking about. And I believe that the war on public schools is a war on worker, children, and teachers.